Yeah. Oh, I wake you up. Okay, that's it. Short and sweet for people who have hyperactivity, attention deficit disorder. I went so fast you probably missed it, so probably it might be worthwhile for anyone who came in late to get one more shot at it. And for those of you who don't know Latin, with apologies to Julius Caesar, now, it really is truly the case that when you're around for almost 40 years, you could spend hours and hours deciding what to talk about. So what I'm going to do is sort of start when I sort of enrolled in Berkeley as an undergraduate. And I found that in those days that we didn't have BRR. We had to go through the old-fashioned way. We had to go through the main gymnasium, and it was roped off like a corral, and there were signs every which way telling you which way you had to go to do this, which way you had to go to do that. And the caption at the bottom says, we're not going to have many students this year. They're not intelligent enough to figure out how to register. So that made a sort of a long-lasting impression on me about the maze-like qualities of careers, and I mean, even from the get-go with college registration. Also, I like the maze being a psychologist. I guess that's a good symbol to reflect, or an icon for psychologists to use. Now, even though I use the analogy of a maze to illustrate careers, of course, unlike rats, we as humans don't literally run through a physical maze. What we do is we instead have other more involved choices where we sort of point and click and somehow get our way through our mazes of life. I don't know if he's here or not, but just in case he is. This is a common sense rational model of Calvin and Hobbes, which basically sort of says, and this is one that appeals to psychologists who are rational and cognitive. We think of things as an intellectual choice. You make one choice, then that leads to another choice, and then you keep branching out. And then finally, something happens. You either have good outcomes or bad outcomes, and depending on whether you've made wise choices, you're going to reap the fruits of what you've done. However, instead of taking this point of view, I'm taking an alternative point of view, which I've called a same place, same type, same time model. And in this model, there are a lot of things that we don't have as much control over as we think we do. And so what choices we do have are not entirely our own, but it's also a function of whoever happens to be at that same place at that same time. So I don't like to think of these so much as choice points as I call them turning points. And this reflects the fact that no matter how well we plan and no matter how well we analyze, our best plans can go wrong because of things that we don't have control over. Now, I don't want to be totally negative and sort of say we have no control. We can still make some judicious decisions and then optimize our chances of success. This is a generic model of a diagram to show what I'm talking about these three different colors, red, purple, and green, represent like three different individuals or three different sets of factors or circumstances at the first turning point. And what I'm going to do in the next few minutes is look at 6 turning points in my own personal career, and I'll explain what these are as we go along just to save time. So I'm going to go sequentially from left to right. And so the first turning point in my career was when I was a senior at Berkeley. I didn't really have a very distinguished academic record. I really wasn't sure what I was going to do with my future. I had just gotten a Dear John letter from my girlfriend of the previous year, and so it didn't look like it was going to be a very good year. And by chance, there was a Professor Underwood who was a visiting professor from Northwestern University. And as fate would have it, I signed up for his class. At Berkeley, usually there's 100, 200, maybe 300 people in the class. In my class, there were 4 students. There was no place to hide, and somehow or other, I impressed him. And by probably November, he was asking me what my plans were for the following year, whether I was going to go to graduate school and so forth. And he basically sort of tapped me on the shoulder and said, if you want to go to Northwestern, you know, just sign up here. And that looked very inviting. If he thought I had ability, who was I to doubt him? He was one of the prominent psychologists in the field at the time, and historically so. And even though then I had some reservations about leaving, I think they're the usual things. Students don't want to go far away from home. Chicago's a long ways. And I had, you know, family ties and you know, sort of wanting to stay in California. But this was an opportunity, and given my other aspects of my life situation, I decided to accept this challenge. And so I went to Northwestern, which was a very positive experience. It was a very good graduate program, and I came in contact with many outstanding students and faculty. After I got my PhD, I had to decide where was I going to go. And one of the possibilities was to come to Long Beach. And there were a number of attractive factors about Long Beach. It was a very new school and very rapidly growing, and I saw a lot of opportunities to have some sort of impact rather than going to a more established school. Also, it was sort of like coming home again, even though, you know, 400 miles further south than the Bay Area. And 3 winters in Chicago in a row can make you want to go anywhere where it's warm. So those were, you know, there were other factors, but I don't want to complicate the diagram, but, you know, those factors combined led me to come to Long Beach. And Long Beach was a very congenial environment. Within the year I came and the year prior to that, we had about 12 or 13 new faculty, which represented about probably half of the total faculty. So we had I won't say a close-knit group, but we had a dynamic, diverse group, and it was, you know, very engaging. However, being young and restless, I guess, 3 years is a long time for me to stay in one place, and I kind of was getting a little disenchanted about some things about Long Beach. The way my mentor at Long Beach, who's photographed here, that's the tall and the short of us, we were office mates for 1 year, my very first year at Long Beach, John Garcia. John Garcia was a brilliant scientist. He made some pioneering findings in the area of conditioning theory and an international reputation. Unfortunately, John didn't have a PhD, and not having a PhD, he couldn't get tenure. Not having tenure, he couldn't get promotion and so forth. And so if he was so smart, why couldn't he do this? Well, because Berkeley required him to pass 2 foreign language exams, and he couldn't pass foreign language exam even though he was a world-class scientist. So basically, he had to leave, and this picture I had taken with him some years after that. And basically, I think what I was telling him there was, John, you really owe us a lot. If Long Beach hadn't kicked your butt out of here, you wouldn't have gone on to Harvard and UCLA and become internationally known as he did. However, at this particular point in time, which was 1965, several other things happened, like Sam Brown, who was a psychologist at Kansas State, who was also working in the area of memory and cognition, had received an invitation to take an appointment at York University, which is in Toronto, Canada. And for reasons I've never found out, he didn't want to go there. So he basically told them, well, why don't you contact John Jung? So one day, out of the blue, I get this phone call from Canada basically offering me a job. And at that moment, I had never heard of it. I never considered it. But given that I was sort of ripe to move, the timing couldn't have come better. So I kind of gave it a little thought and thought, well, what have I got to lose? You know, it'd be kind of interesting to go to a new place. So I went to Canada for 3 years. Now, while I was there for 3 years, it was very rewarding. It was getting used to a British system of education. There were a lot of very interesting researchers there. But what happened while I was there was I started to lose interest in the field for which I was hired, which was sort of verbal learning and memory. I sort of basically found it less interesting. And since I was supposed to be training doctoral students in that field, I really didn't think that I wanted to stay under those circumstances. And so Long Beach started looking better to me, especially after 3 long Toronto winters, which are every bit as ferocious as those in Chicago. But I thought that Long Beach offered a better mix for teaching and research, and so that was appealing to me. And I still had friends like Earlier and Jack Nygaard and so forth, so I was able to get back in the door. I didn't slam the door behind me when I left. And so there were personal reasons, family reasons, and so forth. So I was able to come back decided to come back to Long Beach. Now, after I was back at Long Beach, about several years, another phone call comes in one day out of the blue. Someone who was the executive secretary of the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, that's the NIAAA, was calling to ask me if I would be willing to serve out 2 years of a term of someone who couldn't complete their term on what is basically a grants review committee. It's called the study section. And basically, it's involved evaluating research proposals for research grants. Now, my first thought was, surely they have the wrong number. They've called the wrong person. There are many other psychologists with names like mine, and I'm always getting their phone calls. They're saying, Carl, are you there? Carl? So I thought this was another one of those cases of mistaken identity. But they reassured me, no, I was the one. So I found out subsequently that it had been Mort Apley, who had been my chairman when I was in Canada at York University. Mort Apley was a mover and a shaker in psychology. He authored some books, but he was basically a politician. He went on subsequently to become the president of Clark University, which a lot of us out here don't know about, but it's a very well-known, famous university in New England, and especially for psychologists, because that's basically where Freud met Jung. Mort Apley basically thought highly enough of me that, and he was involved with the NIAAA, that I got that offer. So there was still a couple of reservations, namely 2, fear of failure and fear of getting found out, that I really didn't know anything. But again, I sort of took the attitude was, I wasn't applying for this, and they were offering it to me, so I figured, what have I got to lose? So I accepted that opportunity. About 10 years later, another turning point happened that actually was tied back to the preceding one. Marlene de Rios one morning called me from Washington. She was working for the National Institute of Mental Health, NIMH, which was starting a new program at that time called Minority Access to Research Careers. And they were asking people to write grants to train minority students into research careers. The reason Marlene called me was about 10 years earlier, I had read research of hers dealing with Hispanic alcoholism in the barrio in Santa Ana. And so when I developed my class on alcoholism at Long Beach, I invited her as a guest lecturer, not knowing that 9 years later she would be calling me to reciprocate. So basically she knew me from that contact. So sort of like you can see, one thing leads to another, leads to another. Even then I wasn't sure I was going to apply. I got a lot of help from other people in writing the application. Writing grant applications is a lot of work. There's no guarantee you get funded. You could put in all that work and just have a lot of paper marked disapproved, you know. But we took that opportunity to apply, and we succeeded in getting funded for 5 years. And we've been renewed 3 subsequent times. And as I speak right now, we have an application in for another 5 years. So those are the 6 points, again, that I showed you earlier. You can see that the path is a little unpredictable, not so much from this illustration, but from what I've told you, that I could have never known what would have happened at any point in time predicting into the future. You could say, though, that one thing that I've sort of learned from this, that when you're in this career development, that getting through this maze, you're not necessarily interested in getting through the fastest way. With apologies to John Lennon, you need to give serendipity a chance. You need to explore around. It's a fallacy that rats run through the mazes as fast as they can. That's only when they're hungry. But if you satiate them and put them in there, they're just kind of like wander in a corner and sit there for a while, and they'll explore every single corner. And that's, in a sense, what we should do. The word cul-de-sac has a very unfortunate negative connotation. It means, don't go down that way. You can't get out. That's a dead end. Maybe we should reconceptualize it. My French isn't that good, so I made up a phrase, the sac de jour, This is going to be the little alley that doesn't have an exit that I'm going to explore today to find out what's in there. And I think our careers will be much more profitable. So we could play this sort of what-if game, like what if Marlene de Rios was not at NIMH, that she had not elected to go there. Then obviously if she hadn't been there, then I would not have, if I hadn't been involved with NIAAA, I wouldn't have had a contact with Marlene. If Mort Appley had not been at York and been my chairman, I wouldn't have gotten the contact with NIAAA. And if Sam Brown didn't know me from conferences and publications and so forth, I wouldn't have gotten invited to go to York University, where also I met my wife, Phyllis, of 33 years, so that wouldn't have happened either. She may think that maybe that was unfortunate for her, but in either case, if I didn't have a PhD, I wouldn't have come to Long Beach, and of course, if my mentor, Ben Underwood, had not decided to take a sabbatical at Cal, I would have never ended up at any graduate school.